He took their son without a goodbye. She didn't scream, she hunted. One morning, Eliana Vert opened her phone to a single message. Don't look for us. No calls, no warnings, no explanations. Her husband had vanished, taking their 6-year-old son with him. Across borders, through shadows, behind a web of false names and forged truths. Everyone said, he's the father. Maybe he just needed space. But she knew better, because while he rewrote the story and erased her from their lives, she traced his lies one by one, until the world saw what he really was. And when a mother is written out of the story, she writes herself back in, line by line, city by city, until nothing is left of the man who stole everything. Eliana Vert checked her watch again, thumb twitching over the cracked leather strap. Gate 18C was nearly empty now, just a bored teenager scrolling on his phone and a cleaning lady moving in slow loops. Her suitcase sat obediently beside her, untouched, like a well-behaved dog waiting for a master that never came. She called again, straight to voicemail. 10 minutes ago, she'd laughed nervously at the delay. Tom was always cutting things close. We'll make it with 2 minutes to spare, he'd say, grinning like he owned time itself. But now her smile had dried out, lips tight, breath shallow. Lucas wasn't answering either. She redialed. No answer. No message. Just the hollow beep that kept echoing back like a dare. The trip was meant to be a reset. A week on Lake Como. A private villa. No screens. No meetings. Just her, Tom, and 6-year-old Lucas, relearning how to breathe in the same rhythm. She'd planned everything. The walks through olive groves, the sketch pads for Lucas, the quiet dinners under vines. This was supposed to be their bridge back to each other. Instead, she sat in a terminal filled with fluorescent light and the heavy stench of floor polish, waiting for a family that had evaporated. She finally stood, phone clenched in her palm like a blade. She moved fast now, out through arrivals, down to the curb, into a cab. The driver raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as she barked her address. When she reached the apartment, the first thing she noticed was the silence, thick and artificial, like the air had been vacuumed out. Then came the details. Tom's boots were gone. The framed photo from the hallway, Lucas covered in gelato, grinning, was missing. The entire bottom row of the closet had been emptied. His travel bag, Lucas's backpack, even the worn-out plush fox that always slept beside the boy. Eliana backed up a step, her throat closing. On the kitchen table, a single envelope. No name. Inside, one line, printed in Tom's familiar mechanical font. Don't look for us. This is better for everyone. Her knees gave way before the tears did. 3 days had passed, each one heavier than the last, like wet wool layered over her shoulders. Eliana sat across from the officer at the local precinct, his eyes flicking between her and a flickering screen. He looked too young to shave, let alone understand what it felt like when your child vanished with the man you thought you knew. He's the boy's father, the officer said with a shrug. It's not technically abduction unless there's a custody violation. Eliana leaned forward, voice hoarse. There is no agreement. We were married. We lived together. He took our son without a word. He typed something slowly, deliberately, like a student taking notes in a class he didn't care about. You can file a missing persons notice, but I'll be honest. If the kid's not in danger, they won't prioritize it. Best to reach out to friends, family, check hospitals, that sort of thing. She stood without a word, feeling invisible. Back at the apartment, Everything looked like a crime scene stripped of yellow tape. She walked the perimeter again, room to room, her brain ticking like an investigator, her heart burning like a mother. Drawers still hung open. One of Lucas's socks had been left in the laundry basket. His toothbrush was missing. What chilled her most was the absence of chaos. Tom hadn't fled. He'd prepared, packed carefully, deleted logs from their shared calendar, cleared browser history. It wasn't an act of desperation, it was choreography. She sat on Lucas's empty bed, the duvet still creased with the shape of his small frame. The silence was wrong. It didn't mourn. It mocked. Then she noticed the drawing pinned to the corkboard. Lucas had made it the week before. She remembered helping him find the blue crayon. A crooked house, a sailboat, and a wave taller than both. A stick figure stood on the boat, another on the shore, hands raised. She'd thought it was just childish whimsy. Now, it looked like a confession. Eliana stared at it for a long time before reaching for a blank notebook. No leather, no gilded cover. Just lined paper. She wrote, "Day 3. They're gone. And it feels like they rehearsed it." She closed the notebook and held it to her chest like armor. It was after midnight when Eliana heard the click. A soft, deliberate sound. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to wind or faulty locks. She froze, her pen suspended over the notebook, heart stammering against her ribs. The noise came again, a key turning. The front door handle jiggled once, then held. She moved without thinking, grabbing the kitchen knife from the counter. Her bare feet padded silently across the cold floor. Her breath came shallow. This wasn't paranoia. Someone was unlocking her door. The lock gave. The door creaked open. She stood 10 feet back, blade at her side. A figure stepped into the darkened hallway. Tall, neutral coat, no weapon. Eliana Vert, the man asked calmly. She didn't answer. He raised both hands. "My name is Gregor Lorenz. I'm a private investigator. I used to work for your husband." The knife didn't move. Her eyes flicked over him. No fear, no sweat, no stutter. A man used to saying things people didn't want to hear. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he continued, "but I have information. About Tom. And your son." "Why now?" she asked, voice raw. He stepped inside slowly, pushing the door shut behind him. "Because you weren't supposed to find out. He hired me 6 months ago. Said he needed surveillance on some business partners. I started digging and realized he wasn't tracking threats. He was preparing an exit. Multiple identities. Fake companies. Travel papers. He fired me when I asked too many questions." Gregor reached into his coat and pulled out a battered folder. Inside, photos, receipts, boarding passes, surveillance stills. In one of them, Tom, longer hair, sunglasses, holding Lucas's hand, exiting an airport in Southeast Asia. Eliana stared. This was taken when? 2 weeks ago. Singapore. She dropped into a chair. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried. No jurisdiction. No open case. No one cared." He placed a burner phone on the table. "This has a full copy of everything I've compiled. Contacts, logs, flight paths. You want to find them, you'll need help. And clarity. What do you want in return?" Gregor's eyes held hers. The truth. And for someone to hold him accountable. Eliana looked down at the grainy photo, Tom mid-stride, Lucas looking back over his shoulder. The boy's eyes were hollow. Not scared, but not home. She reached for the phone. "Where do we start?" she asked. Gregor's voice was quiet, but certain. "By following the trail your husband thought he erased." The apartment sat at the edge of a crumbling industrial park, flanked by chain-link fences and graffiti-choked walls. Gregor unlocked the rusted door without hesitation, like a man revisiting a ghost. "Eliana," he said as they stepped inside. "This is where Tom became someone else." The place was surgical. Sparse furniture, a folding bed, a stripped-down desk. No personal photos, no toothbrush, no leftover takeout. But the walls told stories. A large corkboard dominated the far side of the room, dotted with pins, strings, and 3 photos taped in a triangle. Singapore, Malta, Lisbon. They were options, Gregor explained. Safe zones. He spent months studying laws around custody, extradition, and citizenship loopholes. He didn't run, he emigrated. Eliana approached the board slowly, absorbing the quiet violence of it. Color-coded maps, fake passports, notarized documents in 3 languages. Her name appeared once, crossed out. In the bedroom, she found it, a single child's shoe, green canvas with a Velcro strap. Lucas's. Forgotten or left behind. She crouched, holding it like a relic. Her throat closed, but no tears came. She was past that now. "He lived here during business trips," Gregor said from the doorway. "Under the name Ryan Colt." Eliana turned to him. "Why the fake identity?" "Because your name had more value than he did." He needed clean ground to stand on. He handed her a thick envelope. "Patent transfer documents," he said flatly. She skimmed the pages, and her vision tunneled. Her architectural design, a modular eco-housing concept she had spent 2 years developing, was now listed under Colt Design Holdings. Inventor, Thomas Colt. "He stole it," she whispered. "He sold it," Gregor corrected. 3 months ago. For a figure with 6 zeros. The air in the apartment grew colder. "This was never just personal," she said. "He didn't want out. He wanted to erase me." Gregor nodded. "And fund a new life off your work." Eliana stood in the middle of the apartment, surrounded by pins and lies. The kind of place that left no fingerprints, only fractures. "What now?" she asked. "We trace his trail. He chose his destinations for a reason. Malta's the best bet, small, neutral, and cash-friendly." She looked at the board again. The line from Singapore curved neatly to the island in the Mediterranean. "We go to Malta," she said, "and we make sure he knows we're coming." Gregor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "He'll know," he said, "but he won't be ready." The cafe was glass-walled and surgical, nestled on a rooftop in the city center. Exactly the kind of place Diza Carter liked to be seen. Eliana spotted her immediately. Long red coat, oversized sunglasses, fingers poised over a matcha latte like they were sculpting it. Diza looked up as Eliana approached and sighed. "If this is about Tom, I don't want to be involved." Eliana sat without asking. "You already are." A beat passed. Then Diza removed her sunglasses with theatrical slowness, revealing sharp eyes lined with the kind of fatigue that only comes from complicity. "He called me last year," she said finally. "Said he needed help rebranding. A new narrative." Eliana's stomach twisted. "Rebranding what? Our marriage?" Diza shook her head. "His fatherhood. He wanted to position himself as a man rescuing his son from a toxic environment. A mother who meant well, but couldn't see how damaged she'd become." Eliana flinched. "He said that." Diza leaned in. "He said you were obsessive, controlling, that you monitored Lucas's every move, that you'd crush him if given the chance. I was trying to protect him." Eliana's voice cracked. "I know," Diza said, softer now. "But Tom didn't want truth. He wanted a script. Something he could sell to consulates, to journalists, to the boy himself." She slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. It was a printed email draft, never sent. The subject line read, "New Horizons for Lucas." The content was worse. He described their son as fragile, manipulated, claimed Eliana discouraged friendships, enforced dietary regimens that bordered on abusive, and rejected the notion of shared custody with increasing hostility. Every line was a distortion, a bend, a poison-laced twist of reality. He was building legal ground to vanish, Eliana whispered. Diza nodded. He said he needed at least one country to believe him. And you helped him? No, her voice was brittle. I refused after this. Cut ties. But not before I saw something I shouldn't have. She pulled out her phone, thumbed through files, and showed Eliana a still from security footage. Tom, in a different suit, boarding a private charter flight with Lucas. No other passengers. No manifest. Malta, Diza confirmed. It was 3 weeks ago. Eliana stared at the screen. Lucas looked up at his father, confused. Clinging, not trusting. What he took wasn't just my child, she said. He took my reflection and shattered it for his own story. Diza's reply was quiet. Then take it back. Malta shimmered beneath the airplane window like a jewel dipped in smoke. From above, it looked tranquil. Ancient stone, warm sea, sun-pinned alleys. But Eliana knew. Beautiful places often hid the ugliest truths. Gregor was waiting at the gate with a rental car and fresh intel. A name surfaced, he said as they drove. Sabina Marin. Translator. Connected to a local fixer agency used for identity laundering. She filed a temporary guardian request, claiming to be Lucas's aunt. She's not family, Eliana said coldly. No, but the paperwork says otherwise. They followed the address to a quiet harbor town where the houses sat pressed together like secrets. Sabina's building was 3 floors of limestone and neglect. No buzzer, just a red mailbox, slightly ajar. They waited. At 3:47 p.m., Sabina exited, dark sunglasses, scarf, and a child's drawing slipping from her purse. Eliana's heart froze. She stepped forward, blocking the woman's path. "Where's my son?" Sabina halted. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked past Eliana, toward the alley behind her, as if calculating escape. Gregor moved to block it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, accent coated in polish. Eliana reached for the fallen paper. A drawing, Lucas's, unmistakably his hand. A crooked house, a beach, 2 stick figures under a giant sun. Written in shaky print beneath it. "I miss you, Mama." Sabina grabbed the paper, but it was too late. The damage was done. Eliana lunged, fingers closing on the woman's coat. "Where is he? Where are they staying?" "I can't," Sabina hissed. "He said you'd come. He said you'd ruin everything." Gregor pulled them apart. "Let her go," he said softly. "We have enough." Sabina stumbled backward, breath hitching, and ran. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. Later that night, Eliana sat on a hotel balcony with the drawing in her lap. Her fingers traced Lucas's name like it was written in fire. "He didn't choose this," she whispered. Gregor joined her, holding a USB drive. Security footage from a villa outside Medina. A man matching Tom's build. A child playing with a soccer ball. Eliana didn't look at it yet. She just stared into the night. "He said not to look for them," she murmured. "But Lucas, he's asking me to find him." Gregor placed the drive beside the drawing. "Then that's what we'll do." The villa stood on a hill above Medina, draped in shadow and bougainvillea, its pale stone walls blending into the dusty horizon. From a distance, it looked abandoned, windows dark, no car in the drive. But Gregor had cross-checked the footage. "Tom, and Lucas had been here. They parked a street away, climbed the hill on foot, and slipped through the side gate. Inside, the air was stale, laced with salt, and something faintly floral. The rooms were meticulously clean. Too clean. Staged. Devoid of life, like a showroom no one had lived in, but someone had definitely passed through. Eliana, Gregor called from upstairs. You need to see this. She followed the voice into a bedroom. A twin bed, neatly made. A toy car parked beside the pillow. A paper cup with juice residue. A sock on the floor, bright blue, with tiny sharks. Lucas's. She picked it up, and the air shifted. This was real, she whispered. He was here. In the hallway, they found a wall covered with clippings and documents. Not pinned, projected. A tiny digital system embedded in the ceiling cast shifting documents onto the plaster. Eliana watched her own name float across the surface. Eliana Vert, professional instability suspected. Below it, a forged psychological evaluation. He's still building the lie, she muttered. Even now. Then Gregor found it, a hidden microSD card tucked behind a light switch. He slid it into a tablet. On the screen, a grainy video. Tom, in a gray t-shirt, pacing. He spoke softly, facing a webcam. We're nearly ready. The last transfer comes through tomorrow. Once the identity is finalized, we head for Lisbon. There's a backup route if needed. She won't follow. She never does. He turned, and in the background, Lucas played silently with puzzle pieces. Eliana froze the frame. Her son's expression was blank. Not distressed, but dulled, like someone slowly being edited out of himself. He's been conditioning him, Gregor said. He's unmaking him, Eliana snapped. They copied the footage and moved fast. Outside, the wind picked up. No sign of surveillance, until Gregor looked up. A glint. Small. Circular. Cameras, he said. Hidden. 2, maybe 3. We've been watched. They left immediately. Back at the hotel, Eliana stared at the footage again. He knew I'd come, she said. But he didn't think I'd find the trail. Gregor nodded. He underestimated you. That's his first mistake. She didn't blink. And his last, she said. The Maltese consulate sat behind tall glass doors and colder intentions. Its waiting room was white and spotless, as if disinfected daily from the truth. Eliana sat rigid in a plastic chair while Gregor worked his phone in silence. A name repeated itself in their findings. Roland Lavek, a mid-level diplomat with a talent for fast-tracking sensitive papers. He'd signed off on Tom's forged credentials under the name Ryan Colt, listing Lucas as his dependent and claiming Eliana was mentally unfit for parental contact. The lie was surgical. Gregor stood. He's here. 3rd floor. Meeting in 10. Eliana followed him past reception and into the elevator, pulse sharp. She didn't want to scream. She wanted to be undeniable. Lavek's office was minimalist, gray carpet, a single painting of waves crashing against cliffs. The man himself looked exactly as expected, steel gray suit, regulation smile, diplomatic fatigue masked as calm authority. Ms. Vert, he greeted without rising. I'm not sure what this meeting concerns, but I'm aware you've been making inquiries. Eliana slid a folder onto the table. Inside, stills of Tom under false identity, forged patents, the villa's footage. At the top, Lucas's drawing. Lavek glanced once. I'm afraid. You forged documents for a man who kidnapped a child, she said, voice level. And you did it for money. His nostrils flared, but his expression didn't crack. Gregor added, We've already forwarded the same file to the EU Consular Integrity Office and local media. You might want to think before pretending you don't know what's inside that folder. A long pause. Then Lavek stood, walked to the window, back turned. This isn't as simple as you believe, he said. Is it ever? Eliana snapped. When he faced them again, something had changed. The mask slipped just enough to show the man underneath, cornered, calculating. He opened a drawer, removed a single envelope, and laid it on the table. You didn't get this from me. Gregor opened it. Inside, a flight record. Destination, Lisbon. Departure, 2 days prior. Names, Ryan Colt and Lucas Vert Colt. I suggest you leave Malta within 24 hours, Lavek added. For your own safety. They left in silence. Back at the hotel, Eliana didn't cry. She mapped the next city in her head, step by step, brick by brick. He gave us what we need, she said. Gregor nodded. But he also gave a warning. Eliana's eyes didn't leave the window. So let them mourn. Let them scramble. Because I'm not stopping. She picked up the drawing again, folded it once, and slipped it into her coat. Next stop, Lisbon. The flight to Lisbon cut through slate-colored skies. Eliana barely registered the hum of the engine or the murmured safety instructions. Her thoughts moved faster than the aircraft. Every image of Lucas that surfaced in her mind was filtered through that quiet plea. I miss you, Mama. Gregor sat beside her, scanning encrypted messages. A contact in Portugal confirmed what they feared. Tom had activated a local address. A rented apartment. A new name, Daniel Rouse. Halfway through the flight, Eliana's phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. If you come here, he disappears for good. You've already lost. Stop chasing ghosts. She read it 3 times, then handed it to Gregor. His jaw clenched. They're nervous, he said. That's desperation speaking. It's control, she replied. He's used it for years. They landed under bruised clouds. The city below stretched like a faded postcard. At the terminal, a woman stood waiting, dark curls, sharp jawline, a press badge slung around her neck. Diana Souza, investigative journalist. She'd been tracing underground ID operations and had already written about Rouse once, months ago. In her car, she handed Eliana a flash drive. There was a man matching your husband's description seen near Jardim da Estrela. With a child. They pulled up the footage on Gregor's tablet. A park. Sunlight breaking through trees. A child, Lucas, kicking a soccer ball in slow, uncertain motions. A man on the bench, watching. Not playing. Just watching. Eliana paused the frame. Lucas's body leaned away from the man. His feet were planted like he wanted to run, but didn't know where. He doesn't look happy, Diana said softly. He looks like a boy who stopped believing he's allowed to be found, Eliana replied. Gregor leaned forward. We'll hit the park first. If they're still there, we make our move. If not, we go to the apartment. No mistakes, Eliana said. He won't get another chance to vanish. That night, she lay awake in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. A map of the city sat on the nightstand, marked with 3 red circles. Tomorrow, they would move on all of them. She reached for her notebook, opened it to a blank page, and wrote, Day 17. He warned me to stop. I didn't. Now I'm close enough to hear the air he breathes. And I'm not afraid. She set the pen down. Lisbon waited. And so did her son. Jardim da Estrela woke slowly, sun trickling through fig leaves and children's laughter bouncing off wrought iron benches. It was a park painted in innocence, on the surface. Eliana sat at a table near the cafe kiosk, fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't sipped. Her eyes scanned the park in metronome rhythm. Then she saw him. Tom, a man with a cleaner beard, a darker coat, but unmistakably him. He sat on a bench near the fountain, posture relaxed. Too relaxed. Lucas was 10 feet away, pushing a toy truck through gravel, unsupervised. Gregor tensed beside her. Now. Wait, Eliana said. Let Lucas see me. She stood, slow and deliberate, and walked across the gravel. The noise beneath her shoes seemed louder than her heartbeat, though it was impossible. Lucas looked up. Their eyes locked. For half a second, nothing moved. Then, recognition. He dropped the truck and ran. Mama! Eliana dropped to her knees, arms open. His weight hit her chest, warm and shaking. He didn't cry, he clung. Behind them, Tom stood, frozen. Gregor stepped in from the side, calm but firm. Don't. Tom took one step forward. Stop, Eliana said, rising slowly, Lucas still in her arms. Tom's mouth twitched. You made a mistake coming here. No, she said. You did. 3 plainclothes officers approached from opposite ends of the square. Interpol liaisons, activated hours earlier. Tom didn't resist. He knew the choreography was over. As they cuffed him, he looked past the officers, past the boy, to Eliana. She won't forgive you, he said. Eliana held her son tighter. She doesn't need to. They turned to leave. Lucas's fingers knotted in her sweater. But just before stepping out of the park, she looked back. Tom stood still, his eyes wide, his kingdom of falsehoods crumbling around him. It had no walls, no throne, just a bench and a lie. She didn't smile. She didn't scream. She simply walked away, her son in her arms, silence louder than vengeance. The Lisbon courtroom was angular and sterile, built more for bureaucracy than justice. Yet the silence inside it throbbed like a cathedral. Eliana sat behind the plaintiff's table, her hands folded with mechanical calm. Lucas waiting in a room nearby with a trauma specialist. Across the aisle, Tom, in a navy suit and the smug stillness of someone who believed he could bend truth with posture alone. The prosecution began methodically. False identity creation, forged travel documents, the psychological manipulation of a minor. Then came the footage, surveillance clips from the villa, flight manifests, and a digital voice print linking Tom to the consulate email that smeared Eliana's name. He shifted only once, when Lucas's drawing was entered into evidence. The court fell still as the judge held it up, lips tight. Eliana's testimony was last. She stood with a quiet strength that didn't need polish. Her voice never cracked. He told everyone I was unstable, she said. But I was the one left searching. I was the one who stayed. When the defense finally responded, it was a ballet of redirection. They claimed Tom acted out of parental concern, that Eliana had alienated him emotionally, that Lucas needed a balanced environment. But then the boy was brought in. Lucas walked with small steps, sat on the cushion prepared for him. The psychologist stayed nearby, nodding encouragingly. The judge asked gently, "Do you know why you're here, Lucas?" He nodded. "Because Daddy took me away." "Did you want to leave?" "No," he said. He said Mama would come later, but she never did. And then he said not to talk about her anymore. The room held its breath. "Were you scared?" A pause. Then, "Only at night." His voice was clear, not rehearsed, not pushed, just truth, naked and small. The judge closed the session without fanfare. 2 hours later, the decision arrived. Eliana Vert, sole legal guardian. Thomas Colt, guilty of international child abduction, fraud, and emotional coercion. Outside the courthouse, Reporters clustered, microphones raised like weapons. Gregor blocked them as Eliana carried Lucas to the waiting car. The boy rested his head on her shoulder and whispered, "Are we going home now?" "Yes," she said. "The real one." They drove in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but of something newly whole. The house greeted them like it had been holding its breath. White walls, dustless shelves, the hollow quiet of rooms that had forgotten laughter. Eliana set her keys down slowly, the clink echoing like a bell across a cathedral. Lucas stood beside her, staring at the staircase. "Is my fox still here?" he asked. She smiled. "Let's go find him." They climbed together. In the boys' room, everything was as it had been, except for the small indents on the bed where she used to sit each night and hope. Lucas opened a drawer, pulled out the faded plush fox, and hugged it tightly without a word. Later, she baked pie, his favorite, peach and cinnamon. The scent filled the space like a spell. Lucas wandered the house slowly, pausing at corners as if greeting ghosts. At dinner, he drew again. This time, it wasn't a boat. It was a bridge. Two figures holding hands, standing in the middle. He passed it across the table. "This one's better, right?" Eliana's eyes welled, but she blinked them clear. "It's perfect." When Lucas went to bed, she returned to her office, the room Tom once mocked as the control tower. On the desk lay the official documents restoring her name as the inventor of the sustainable housing design Tom had tried to steal. Stamped. Signed. Hers again. But more than that, she was hers again. No shadows. No script written by another hand. The door creaked, and Lucas peeked in, dragging his fox. "Can I sleep in your bed tonight?" "Of course." She closed the laptop, took his hand, and followed him up the stairs. Before sleep, she sat beside him and opened the notebook, the one that began with loss. She turned to a clean page and wrote, "Day 22. He didn't vanish. I did. I folded myself smaller and smaller until only the outline was left. But now the color's coming back." She closed the notebook and placed it on the nightstand. Outside the window, the wind stirred the leaves like a whisper of something ending. Or beginning. She lay beside Lucas, his breath slow and even, and stared at the ceiling. Not searching, not running, just there. The house no longer felt like a stage set for someone else's performance. It felt lived in, real, and finally, after all the noise, quiet. There are silences that destroy and silences that rebuild. Eliana had known both. Once, she stood in a home that felt like a stranger's skin, rooms echoing with what was lost, memories rearranged by someone else's hands. But the storm passed, and in its wake came something quieter. Not peace, not yet, but the beginnings of it. She had crossed continents, unraveled lies, and faced a world that tried to convince her she was overreacting. But the truth is never dramatic. It's patient. It waits. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't shout. It simply stays. Eliana didn't win by punishing. She won by refusing to disappear. Lucas would grow up knowing that stories aren't shaped by the loudest voices, but by the ones that refuse to be silenced. He would remember that his mother did not chase vengeance. She reclaimed truth. And in doing so, she gave him something his father never could. A life rooted in reality, not illusion. There will always be people who rewrite your name, steal your pages, bend your story to fit their narrative. But in the end, what you reclaim with truth can never be erased.